Have any of you ever struggled with what you believe? I believe that each and every one of us has struggled with our faith at some point in our lives. I once felt so lost that I resorted to taking an online quiz to discover which religion suited me best. And it turns out the results were amazingly accurate. After continuing reading and researching and attending several services, it turned out that this was what I had always believed in but never had a name for. It seems that it was my struggle that actually led me to where I belonged. Or as Charles West once said, we turn to God when our foundations are shaking, only to find out that it is God shaking them. It turns out there are 360,000 others in the world practicing this branch of Christianity known as Quakerism. It's a religion that many of you have probably heard of, but probably don't know much about. And I'd like to change that for you today and teach you about the 4 main principles of Quakerism, the way they try to practice these beliefs, and how I try to implement them in my life. Let's begin with simplicity. Simplicity, or plainness, is the belief in the importance of minimizing worldly distractions, such as fancy wardrobe, money, and possessions, in order to focus on what is more important, which is God, or what some Quakers refer to as the inner light. Quakers practice simplicity in many different ways. They often emphasize plainness in dress. Now, most of you probably imagine this as what a Quaker looks like. It turns out that in the 1700s, this is what Quakers wore. Unfortunately, this made them stand out a little too much, so now you'll likely find people wearing a plain version of modern fashion. The Quakers also try to be simplistic in their possessions, and they believe that monetary wealth can be a distraction from spirituality. The buildings themselves, known as meeting houses, are very plain, and they have little to no adornment inside or out. And Quaker services, known as meetings, are often held mostly in silence, waiting upon the inspiration of God. Now, in my life, I still struggle with simplicity. In fact, we lost power tonight, and I find myself struggling a lot with that. I do want all of the fancy and new gadgets. I do own a house, and all of my rooms are filled. But most of what I own is secondhand. I don't spend money beyond my means, and I try to be grateful for everything that I have and remind myself that there are people who live on much less than I do. I find that the less distracted I am by money, materials, gadgets, technology, the more capable I am to hear God. Another important belief of the Quakers is that of integrity. Integrity is the belief in the importance of honesty and truth at all times. And in practice, this truth must be full and complete. It cannot simply be the avoidance of outright lies, because misleading is as bad as a lie. One common practice of Quakers is to avoid swearing oaths, that they should only say yes or no, their words should be good enough. And this comes from a Bible passage, Matthew chapter 5, verses 34 through 37. But I say unto you, do not swear at all, neither by the heaven, for it is the throne of God, nor by the earth, for it is the footstool at his feet, nor by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. Neither shalt thou swear by thy head, for thou cannot make one hair white or black. But let your speech be yea or nay, and whosoever is more than these is of the evil one. In business relations, Quakers don't believe in haggling. They believe in setting a fair and fixed price to begin with. And Quakers believe in not taking credit for others' contributions. Now, in this class, we would call that plagiarism, and I believe we're all keenly aware of the importance of avoiding this. In my life, I try not to lie. Truth is very important to me, and lies make me very uncomfortable. I believe we only have our word in this world, and if my words can't be trusted, what else do I have to offer? The third principle of Quakerism shows how influential Quakers have been in this country's history, and that is the belief of equality. This is the belief that all people are equal and all people are capable of being spoken to and led by the Spirit. In fact, Quakers were among the first to advocate for gender and racial equality, and members of Quaker meeting houses were prohibited from owning slaves as early as 1776. They were among the most influential members of the Underground Railroad. And Susan B. Anthony and Lucretia Mott, both Quakers, were the major advocates for the women's suffrage movement. They were the first to advocate for humane treatment of prisoners and those with mental illness. Some Quakers will refuse to take off their hats or bow to anyone in authority, or use their titles such as Mr., Mrs., Dr., Sir, Lord, etc. Now, I find myself in situations in my life where I do have to refer to people according to their titles, but I do believe in the equality of all. The Quaker belief is that there is that of God in all of us. And there are people in this world that I don't like, but I believe they need to be treated with as much respect as anyone else. And it is my goal to find that peace of God in everyone I meet. Now, the fourth and final principle of Quakerism is my favorite one, and the one that most attracted me to the religion. It's also most likely the one that you've heard of. It's the most well-known belief of Quakers, and that's the idea of peace. This is the belief that violence is unacceptable and that peace must be actively practiced, like Jesus did. One of the earliest Quakers, Margaret Fell, sums up the belief very well in her quote, "All bloody principles and practices we do utterly deny. With all outward wars and strife and fightings with outward weapons for any end or under any pretense whatsoever, and this is our testimony to the whole world, that the Spirit of Christ, which leads us into all truth, will never move us to fight any war against any man with outward weapons, neither for the kingdom of Christ nor for the kingdoms of this world." Now, many Quakers have been known for a long time to refuse to bear arms, and they often successfully achieve conscientious objector status during military drafts. Some Quakers actually refuse to pay taxes that will go towards military expenses, and this is something they've actually been able to work out with the IRS. Now, I haven't figured out how to keep my taxes out of the military's hands, but I do consider peace a great priority in my life. I have a tattoo of a dove, which is a symbol of peace, right above my heart. And I attended the 2003 march in New York City to protest the invasion of Iraq. It seems to be an unpopular belief, but I truly believe that nothing will ever be solved by violence or war. I believe that my mission on this earth, albeit dauntingly impossible, is to emulate the actions of Jesus as closely as possible. And Jesus preached to turn the other cheek and to love your neighbor and your enemy. And the best way that I can emulate Jesus's teachings in my life is to be as peaceful as possible in my words and actions. Now, clearly, each individual Quaker is much more complex than a set of beliefs. But simplicity, integrity, equality, and peace provide a general framework which most Quakers will attempt to adhere to. These beliefs can be hard to live up to, but I do try to adhere to them in my everyday life. And the closer I get to living my life according to my beliefs, the more content and more peaceful I feel. I feel so grateful that I was able to find a set of beliefs that works perfectly for me. And I I find it so amazing that it was as simple as conducting an online search. And yet, maybe it's not all that surprising, because as Albert Einstein once said, when the solution is simple, God is speaking.